My parents weren't home that day, so it was just Mark and me, and it was peaceful. I was sitting on the couch, watching a comedy on TV with my eyes fixed absently. I nearly forgot about everything except the pictures that were flashing in front of my eyes, because the environment was so serene. Mark abruptly got to his feet, his eyes blazing a weird tint, as though he had just come to a significant realization. He hurried to the main door without saying anything. Mark had locked the door with a gentle click while I was still pondering. He spun around and hurried over to me, his eyes laden with an emotion too strong to describe. Mark hurried over and pounced on me before I could comprehend what was happening, leaving me with no time to respond. Time appeared to freeze, and space seemed squeezed. I was surprised, then frozen. All borders were swept away in an abrupt tornado-like event. I understood that what followed would permanently alter my life. Hi there. My name is Olivia, and I recently turned 18. I live contentedly with my modest family. My parents give me a lot of love and attention because I'm the only child in the family. They consistently promote my personal interests and give me the best items. My greatest passion among those interests is rearing pets, especially beautiful dogs. When I was 14 years old, I fell in love with dogs. I used to watch a lot of animal-related TV shows at the time, and I was constantly captivated by the pictures of devoted, beautiful dogs. For a long time, I pleaded with my parents to let me own a dog. My parents finally gave in one day, and I was taken to a dog farm to select a 4-legged pal to be my company. The commotion of the puppies in the kennel overwhelmed me as soon as I walked in. However, one dog in particular drew my attention right away out of all of them. It was a Great Dane with soft eyes, smooth fur, and a strikingly tall build. Despite his reputation as a huge dog, the Great Dane looked adorable and naive as a puppy. At first glance, I sensed a unique bond with this dog. I made the decision to make him my new friend without hesitation. At first, my decision startled my parents a lot. They were concerned that caring for a big dog like the Great Dane might be challenging, but I persuaded them because of my tenacity and affection for this puppy. We named him Mark and took him home. The first few days of living with Mark were genuinely unforgettable. He was lovable and mischievous. Mark was incredibly intelligent and picked up simple instructions like wait, stand, and sit rapidly. We grew close and accompanied each other everywhere, from pleasant moments on the floor to strolls in the park. Mark matured rapidly over time. He grew into a towering, friendly, and devoted gigantic dog. In addition to being a pet, Mark had a significant role in the household. Mark was always there to soothe me with his soft gaze and licks whenever I was feeling anxious or depressed. Mark was more than a dog to me. In addition to being a friend and companion, he was proof of the unwavering love that exists between people and animals. I learned to be patient, responsible, and to appreciate life's small pleasures because of Mark. No matter who you are or where you are, I think everyone deserves a special friend like Mark in their life. Someone who will always love you without conditions and never abandon you. I always imagined that Mark and I would be in love for eternity and lead contented lives together. Unexpectedly, though, something happened on my 18th birthday that drastically altered Mark's and my relationship. The Sunday morning was lovely. As usual, Mark and I took a stroll in the park, close to our home. Mark cherished these excursions. He would run around, take in the fresh air, and occasionally pause to observe the passing birds or smell a flower bush. Seeing Mark happy always made me smile. However, that morning was different. Mark abruptly changed as we were strolling. He came to a halt, his ears alert, his gaze trailing behind a distant dog. With a gorgeous golden coat and an elegant walk. It was a female Great Dane as well. An unseen gravitational pull pulled Mark toward the puppy as soon as he noticed it. Its massive legs darted so quickly that I was unable to respond as it vigorously wagged its tail. I did my best to keep the leash from slipping off Mark's neck, but he was too powerful. I stumbled and nearly fell as it pulled me a long distance. Despite my loud yell, it didn't appear to hear Mark's name. As though it had just experienced love at first sight, it simply ran in the direction of the other dog. I didn't know what to do, and my heart was racing. Finally, in a desperate moment, I yelled, "Stop, Mark!" Mark was startled by the volume of my outburst. He came to a halt and gave me a perplexed, remorseful glance. It was only then that I could see Mark's grief. He seemed to realize that his acts had made me unhappy, since his eyes were sorrowful and his ears were drooping. However, I had no choice but to gently tug the leash and bring Mark home. I observed that Mark wasn't like him on the way home. He stopped joyfully waving his tail and running around. Rather, he strolled silently and slowly next to me. I experienced an inexplicable emotion. I felt bad for shouting at Mark, but I also felt sad for him. However, I was also concerned about whether our connection would continue to be the same. Mark slept soundly in the room's corner that night, his eyes dreamy. The Great Dane he had met that morning might have been on his mind. I approached Mark, caressed his silky fur, and whispered, "Mark, I will always love you, no matter what. However, I need your attention. You get it?" Mark looked up at me, his eyes glimmering as though he understood. I grinned a little, praying that nothing would alter our friendship. As usual, I embraced Mark to sleep that night. Mark was accustomed to nestling with me. There was always a sense of security and tranquility in his steady breathing. I put a soft hand on his back and stroked his silky fur, like I always did before bed. However, Mark made a little groan, as though he sensed something odd, when he unintentionally touched a particular area. Even though the murmur was so faint that it startled me, Mark remained motionless, as if unperturbed. My heart began to beat more quickly than normal as I carefully withdrew my hand. I experienced an odd feeling at that little instant that was both perplexed and startled. In the faint glow of the nightlight, I lay motionless, silently staring at the ceiling. I became restless as random ideas started to cross my mind. Although I had always had a particular bond with Mark, there was something really odd about this time. A stick was lying in front of me when I slowly sat up and came out of bed to look, since I couldn't contain my curiosity any longer. I experienced an inexplicable mixture of excitement and nervousness when I saw it. I sat down slowly and gazed at the stick. My heart felt a great deal of concern. I slowly inserted my hand after a while, as though something was taking over my thoughts. It was inexplicably warm. Mark shuddered every time I touched it. Something eventually poured out and adhered to my hand. I got to my feet and turned to face Mark, who was still sleeping comfortably. I lay down lightly on the bed and gave him a hug without waking him. I had trouble falling asleep that night. I couldn't get the weird sensation and curiosity out of my head, like a new door opening between Mark and me. I didn't anticipate feeling a deeper, different connection than I experienced before, because of Mark's natural emotions. In addition to being a devoted dog, he was a complicated person, with feelings and behaviors that took some time for me to comprehend. During that night, I started to have an odd sensation that was difficult to describe. I could feel the simmering vibrations in my heart rising stronger every time I looked at Mark. I no longer saw Mark as merely a dog or a friend, but rather as something deeper and more unique. I was both excited and perplexed by the sensation, wondering what was actually happening inside of me. Mark also appeared to notice my change. He had eyes that changed every time I glanced at him. They appeared more considerate and polite, as though he could read my mind. I occasionally caught Mark staring at me for a considerable amount of time, his vivid eyes brimming with feelings I was unable to identify. Our already profound bond seems to have been elevated to a new plane of significance. Mark and I were sitting in the yard one afternoon while the sun was peeking through the trees. Mark was lying next to me with his head on my leg and his eyes half closed, seemingly content with the quiet. I felt the warmth emanating from Mark as I stretched out to rub his silky fur. This time, however, I felt as though an electric current was coursing through my body, in place of the customary familiarity. I trembled in an odd way at that very moment of touch. I leaned over and stared at Mark for a while. His large brown eyes gleamed with an odd comprehension as he opened them. I thought he was telling me something at that very time that we both understood, but were unable to express. I was perplexed by Mark's eyes, but they also gave me an odd sense of comfort, until one day, things became unmanageable. Mark and I were the only ones at home that day, since my parents had to leave for the day. It got oddly quiet in the house, which was always full of warmth and laughter. I had the entire room to myself with Mark. Something amazing was about to happen, and I felt both excited and a little weird about it. Mark was lying next to me, watching everything I did. He seemed to be able to feel the oddness of the day's atmosphere. I was unsure of what was causing my restlessness, but Mark's typically kind and perceptive gaze seemed to be anticipating something. The only sound in the home was the ticking of the clock. In the living area, Mark and I sat together as a light movie that I had selected to help me relax flickered on the TV screen. Mark was lying near my feet, his head resting lightly on my knee as I rested against the sofa. Mark's eyes gleamed even more as the TV's light bounced off of them. Mark got to his feet abruptly, his eyes glimmering with an odd hue, as though he had just come to a significant realization. He hurried to the main door without saying anything. Mark had locked the door with a gentle click while I was still pondering. He spun around, a fierce feeling difficult to describe shining in his eyes, and hurried over to me. Mark had hurried forward and pounced on me before I could comprehend what was happening, leaving me with no time to respond. Time appeared to freeze, and space seemed squeezed. Then I froze, stunned. Everything occurred in an abrupt whirlwind that erased all limits. I was frozen in the moment, unable to respond. Time appeared to pause, and the growing tension choked space. The world around me grew hazy, and my heart was the only thing thumping in my chest. The events that followed were like a tornado that swept away all limits and separations. I had no idea what had motivated Mark, and I had no idea what to do at the time. However, I was certain that what had just transpired would permanently alter my life. Someone had opened a door, and there was no way to shut it. From that day on, Mark and I shared an intangible connection that was eerie and difficult to explain. We never discussed what had happened, but I could tell we were both thinking about it every time our eyes locked, like a smoldering fire blazing in the stillness of the house. There was a secret that only he and I knew, a calm harmony. The following time, things went more smoothly, as though we understood one another implicitly and knew where to begin. Mark would approach me with both strength and tenderness each time the door closed and we were in the room. He caressed me in a way that seemed to confirm that I was his, and his alone. I can't say that I was entirely opposed to it, since I secretly yearned for that sensation, which was both thrilling and scary. I felt as though I forgot everything else while I was with Mark. I felt a surge of feelings that made me shudder and burst inside. It felt like every cell in my body was responding to Mark's presence, and it went beyond simple physical contact. My breathing grew labored, my heart accelerated, and I lost control over my body's responses. All concerns and ideas of the repercussions vanished, leaving only Mark's powerful allure. In situations like this, I would sit and ask myself questions when the room was silent once more. My parents, who have always had faith in us, would never accept what was happening since I knew it was wrong. But I couldn't give up on that sensation, that inexplicable emotion. It made me feel both afraid and wanting more, almost like an addiction. I always pretended to be normal around my parents, keeping all of this hidden in my heart. I knew in my heart that not everyone would accept this relationship, but neither Mark nor I could get away. I kept concealing everything behind the familiar walls as time went on, but I always had a gut feeling that this couldn't go on forever. I didn't have the guts to stop it, but I also didn't dare to imagine the day when everything would be found out. We simply continued to descend, day after day, as though I was stuck in an unbreakable vortex. It was difficult for me to put into words how I felt the day I got accepted to a far-off institution. The opening of the door to the future should have made me glad, but instead I felt depressed. I knew in my heart that this meant I would have to part ways with Mark, my buddy, my comrade, and the object of my inexpressible affections. In the days before I left, I made an effort to keep it out of my mind. I convinced myself that moving away would help me get rid of these conflicting emotions, and that beginning a new life would calm me down. However, each time I gazed into Mark's eyes, I felt as though I was betraying him and the unique bond we had shared. There was silence in the house the day I departed. Mark silently followed me, his sorrowful eyes watching me every step of the way, as my parents assisted me in packing my belongings into a suitcase. He seems to realize that things would never be the same once I left. I leaned down to give Mark a final hug as the car was ready to move. Even though his fur was still warm, it was a profound melancholy in that cuddle today that I was unable to explain. As though to restrain me, Mark stroked his head lightly against my shoulder. My eyes began to well up with tears, but I made an effort to contain them in front of my parents. I looked over when the automobile began to move. Even though Mark's eyes were bright in the morning light as he stood on the doorstep, they were filled with emptiness. Instead of running after me, he simply remained there and watched me go. That picture stuck in my head like a silent farewell, but it hurt more than words could. I kept thinking about Mark on the way to school. I kept thinking about all the memories, the secrets, and the times that were just the two of us. I pondered whether leaving was the best way to put an end to everything, or if it was only the start of an unending desire. I knew I would always miss Mark in this distant land, even though I wasn't sure if he would forget me. Thus, I embarked on a new phase of my life, leaving behind unnamed feelings, unsaid secrets, and a friendship that would never be the same. As I reflected on the entire Mark and I tale, I came to the conclusion that relationships and emotions in life constantly surpass our expectations. I had the chance to spend wonderful years with Mark, a devoted friend who supported me no matter what, starting when I was a naive 14-year-old kid. However, that attachment also carried with it complex feelings, which taught me important lessons. First, I discovered that love is a duty, as well as a relationship. Respect and understanding are necessary for loving someone, whether they are a human or a pet. Although emotions that transcend boundaries can be confusing, it's crucial to know how to uphold your moral principles in order to know what is right. Second, I came to the realization that some relationships, no matter how lovely, need time apart in order for both parties to develop. One of the most difficult choices I've ever had to make was to leave Mark, but it was essential for me to continue on my journey. Sometimes being apart is about making room for us to both live the lives we deserve, not about losing something. I would advise everyone to value their connections, but to keep their emotions in check. You will experience a wide range of complex emotions in life, and occasionally, you may feel overwhelmed by your current situation. In these situations, pause and consider what is right and what would truly make you and the person or thing you love happy. You should also set boundaries to protect both yourself and others around you. Not every emotion should transcend its natural bounds, and not every emotion must be acted upon. Mark will always be a lovely memory of my childhood. I learned how to let go, as well as how to love when I parted ways with him. Throughout my maturation process, I will always keep it in mind. I will always cherish and value our friendship, even though Mark is no longer with me.